What's going on, folks? Welcome back to Bet Boys, your one-stop shop for all your energy drink reviews and performance stocks. I'm Christian,
I'm Brian.
and we are the Bet Boys. And today we got another little solo dolo episode, just me and Brian chopping it up. Got a few topics we're going to go over, some educational, some more entertainment focused, I guess you could say. But yeah, I got a little something different for us today. Something I haven't seen down here, and I think I've seen this brand, but I haven't seen it in a while. So I'm excited to try it. I don't know, Brian, if you got something today or
Yeah. I want to see what you got first, though. It's not often you get a little treat. So I want to see what
yeah.
this little treat is.
So found this bad boy random. There was only like two of them left. I picked it up. It is an
Oh,
accelerator.
yes.
So accelerator cherry ice pop. So I remember this is like a skinny 12-ounce can. I think these used to come in like the regular 16-ounce can. They used to
They
sell them.
did.
I remember specifically they sell them at like Casey's and like Quick Trip. I know
And
Casey's for
Target.
sure. Yes. And I've had them before. I don't think I don't even know if they had the cherry ice pop at that point. But yeah, this is like really reminded me of a cherry Celsius. So we'll see if the taste is similar, but pretty similar on the nutrition ingredients to a Celsius. So it's 10 calories, no carbs. Not sure where those calories are coming from. Miscellaneous. Got 200
Miscellaneous
milligrams.
sources.
Yeah, miscellaneous sources. You got your B vitamins in there, like a pitiful amount of potassium and magnesium, so they can say that they have electrolytes. Um, and we got 200 milligrams of caffeine. So the tall 12-ounce can, reminiscent of like a Celsius or a Alani Nu. Got some claims on here: sustained energy, accelerates metabolism, enhanced focus, yada yada yada, all that good stuff. But this thing was like 99 pesos, which comes out to like $1.65. So that's a pretty good steal for 200 migs. Um,
Yeah.
can is I'd say the can is decent. A little white top. I don't know if I'm messing with that as
Is
much,
that,
but
does it, is it a engraved top or is it just a printed
it's
little?
it's just the printed. It has the logo, but it's just flat. So better than nothing, but
I
man,
like the
fucking Red
cutouts.
Bull.
I like the
Yeah,
cutouts. Like Red Bull does it, Monster does it. Like when they
yep,
do like a cutout or just a standard can.
yeah. Those little details.
Do you know what the difference is of the 16 ounce to the 12 ounce?
What is it?
So they
Does the
used to be
16 ounce
called
have 300?
the 16 ounce had 200,
Okay,
but they used to be called accelerator shocks or
that's right.
A shocks.
A Shock. So is
Yes,
this
and
the
they
same brand?
it's
It
the
looks
same
like the
brand.
same logo.
It's the same logo, same brand. They went through a rebrand and they dropped the 12 ounce and went to the just accelerator. But they used to have really sick flavors. They had an island guava that was really good, that like blue and pink can, and they had a like a blackberry lemonade. They did that before anybody else. I'll give them credit on that one. But they used to have a really good cherry limeade.
Yeah, I'm excited for this. I don't know. Cherry can be done well or pretty bad. So
Yeah,
being a fan of the cherry Alani, I know Brian absolutely hates it, but I think
disgusting.
yeah. So, but I think I probably have a better chance of liking it. So yeah, excited.
They sponsor Travis Kelsey,
Interesting.
or Travis Kelsey owns them, perhaps. But I've been on a kick lately because of the first one I had, which I have yet to review the first one that I've drank from their rebrand. But I again have another 3D. I'm just working my way through cases of each flavor. I've done the cucumber melon, which I like. I don't know if I would buy a case again. It's more of a change up. I've done the blueberry mist, which I reviewed, and the strawberry lemonade, which I reviewed. And now I'm finally on my third case or my fourth case, and I'm reviewing the watermelon grape, which
Oof.
my lighting is terrible. So, boom, if that would work. Now I can look like a ghost really quick. God, this is just bad lighting. Buy some t-shirts so I can get some good studio lighting because I look like a ghost and a shadow, please. And it's not cool like my hat. It's more like, oh my God, this guy needs to go out in the sun. I swear to God, I'm tan.
Yeah,
But
buy a hat too. Speaking of
yeah,
hats,
yes, we have hats now. Mine's getting printed right now, I think. But we have dad hats with the Bev Boys logo. Bevy's on the front. They come in tan. They come in white. We've been waiting so long to get these made and try to get these in store, and they're now available. You can go buy one today. Go to bevboys.com and shop. Just shop. Grab your mom's credit card. Even if you're 30, just grab your mom's credit card and just be like, Mom, I need this. Just let her know. But so it's like a purple to pink kind of ombre on the can. Still the same simple look. 10 cals. All the 3Ds are the same exact formula. God, this is a screaming cold can. It's like sweating right now. I love this. But what's kind of cool is like up at the top, there's like little bubbles that are grapes. I know it's really hard to see because I'm an idiot with lighting and I move my office around. But I'm just gonna.
Wow.
That's a good pop.
Mine was a little underwhelming. It was a quick one,
But I think it was still a good
but
pop.
yeah, it wasn't a sad one.
I really like this. I really, really like this. It's so weird. You want me to give him what's your first impression take on the cherry pop?
Not gonna lie, dude, this kind of sucks. I don't know if this is like. I think I'm experiencing what you feel like when you drink the cherry Alani.
Where
Is
it's
this
like
shit
really
kind of tastes like
sugary.
cough syrup?
Yeah.
It's like super sweet cough syrup. It does not taste. I think the Alani tastes different than this.
Well, maybe I like that one.
Shit, maybe it's yeah. It's like it's very sweet, but it's got like a weird like metallic aftertaste a little bit, and it's more
Oh,
reminiscent of like a cough syrup. Unfortunately,
then maybe I'll hate it more than the Alani. I don't think we're getting a good review out of you today.
yeah. God, I was really excited for this. I was excited when I saw it. I was excited waiting for it, and
It,
it's just a huge letdown. God damn it.
cherry ice pop. They released cherry ice pop with the rocket pop. Was that the other flavor you got?
No, this was the only. This was just red. It was like
Oh, they
sparkling
just had
ice,
two.
Red Bull, and then just a random accelerator cherry ice pop.
This goes grape to watermelon like really quick as you drink it, but it's the aftertaste that gets me. If you like sweet, which I'm not a huge fan of sweet, but I do like this. If you like sweet, people will love this, and this is what I'm going to relate it to. It finishes with like the same taste of if you were like crunching nerds in your mouth. You know that kind of like sugary taste.
Mm,
If you like that like candy, like that's what it finishes with. It's really really good. It's something different. Again, I'm not a huge sweet guy, but when it comes to like the sweet flavor, I think this is done very well. It'll get naturally a little bit lower of a rating from me because of that. It's not on the tart side, but as far as a sweet flavor goes, this might be a really up there sweet flavor. Got to give a fair review. I can't just be like, "Oh, I don't like sweet, so fuck it."
yeah, I don't know how I'm gonna give a fair review to this guy though.
Oh, it's not getting. I can already tell. I can see the look on your face. That thing's
Yeah,
getting sent to the Thunderdome.
yeah, yeah. When I was speaking of that watermelon grape, when I was home for a wedding briefly for
Mhm.
like 2 days. Sent you some
16 energy
pictures.
drinks.
Yeah, I was gonna say crushed like 4 energy drinks in 2 days.
Was that at your
Dude,
gym?
yeah.
Can we
So
get a
shout
shout
out
out to the
Iowa
gym?
Strength.
Yeah.
Yeah, shout out Iowa Strength, Chris at Iowa Strength, and all the guys working at Iowa Strength. Sickest gym, like it's just a local gym. He's owned it for I think over 10 years now. It started in like a shoebox, like on the other side of Independence, Iowa. If you're ever in like the Waterloo area, it's worth the drive. Started in like a shoebox with like what you would find in like a garage, like if someone's like garage gym, like getting like secondhand stuff, this and that. And now over the years they've expanded to this like much bigger facility. They're always like getting new equipment. One thing I really like about them is like the equipment's not really like uniform. They're always just picking up like random pieces of machinery, and they all kind of have a story behind it. I think I've talked about that before.
Hmm.
Um,
The wagon
and
wheels they
they're
had.
exactly they have the wagon wheels. They have a good amount of hammer strength stuff. which fucks obviously. Um, and then they got some strongman stuff like some Atlas stones, yoke, that type of stuff. And then their supplement selection, their supplement store is unrivaled in my opinion. They carry MTS products, not like I don't know of any other like brick and mortar store that carries MTS products. Like they're
I
sure
don't
there
think
is, but
so.
they're few and far between.
Yeah.
Um, and they're always stocked with like the newest. They had all those David bars, all those protein bars, energy drinks. It was tough to. I wish I could have been there for longer. But yeah, I know Chris said he actually really liked that watermelon grape. I picked up. I picked up a Gorilla Mind. It was the orange and cream one. I hadn't had that
Okay.
one before. That was like new since I had been there. Crushed that. That was solid. Not my favorite Gorilla Mind, but it was
It's
either
still a
that. I was
solid
thinking,
one.
yeah, it's still a solid. I crushed like a sour gummy worm grain. I think the next day I needed something that I knew was going to be good. Throwback. But the best one that I had, and I know that you can relate to this, is the iced tea lemonade ghost. Oh
I've
my
been wait.
God.
I have been waiting to
That
talk about
was
this.
incredible.
We need an official review. I put a teaser on my story about 2.5 weeks ago when I could get my hands on it. I don't know if I'm allowed to do this, but sour pink lemonade might have a run for his money. The
Yeah,
ice
that's
the
how I
the
feel too.
the iced tea lemonade, it might be the new perfect 10. I drank it and I was like, this is a slightly carbonated like Arizona Arnold Palmer
Exactly.
with 200 milligrams of caffeine and 150 milligrams of alpha GPC, like, and some cognizant in there. Like, you can't beat that. That's so good. It's We got to get an official review. It's sold out everywhere, so I got to see if I can get my contacts to get me some. But it is legitimately that good. I know it's not the basis of this episode, but it is such a good drink. I would drink 14 of them in a day and just simply be vibrating like the enemy in Scooby Doo Cyber Chase.
Yeah. No, it was really good. And that was my first look at the new like the revamped Ghost can without the heat seal.
I love it.
I like
People
it. Yeah. I
people hate
wish they
on
would
it.
have
I love it.
I yeah, I know it's definitely an upgrade. I go back and forth on whether it would be better if they just did what Monster did and had like the embossed. Um, but
I
I
would
know that
have.
is super expensive actually. That's from what I've heard. And Monsters kind of like just does whatever they want because they're like the
Yeah.
biggest brand. Um, but it's definitely an upgrade from that heat seal for sure.
I would imagine that down the line, because now that they've gotten sold and Dr. Pepper Keurig owns them, they still have their creative control. I would assume at some point they move to like a more just embossed can. And then that becomes like the final iteration where it's literally the perfect can. I think this is an upgrade from the old one. The embossed was really cool because you could feel the textured logo and everything. But that heat seal, when you catch a little bit on your lip, there was nothing worse.
Yeah.
I think this is right now. This was the smart move to expedite production as well as like remove like production issues of like that heat seal.
Yeah, it's a good evolution. Um,
Mm-hmm.
looking for Gorilla Mind to do the same thing in the near future. I feel like.
I think there's got to be a possibility for it. Gorilla Mind, it's the same problem where like it's a sick looking can, um, but if like one thing goes wrong on a heat seal, it's out of line. Number one, which can lead to problems of the look, and if you're selling a product, you want it to look great. Number two, like if you catch one of those again on your lip, that's like the worst thing ever. You just keep kind of like rubbing your lip on it. Um, and then I did try the Blue Raz Gorilla Mind.
I thought about getting that one. I was between that and the orange like creamsicle one.
I think Blue Raz is a little overdone as a
Flavor in
drink.
general.
Like everyone just does it. I think they did it pretty well. I'll get it. I'll get my hands on it again and do an official review. I actually had that one earlier this week, but I think they do a pretty good job of a Blue Raz of it being much less just generic blue that's kind of tart and kind of sweet, and it's more of like raspberry, but we colored it blue, which
Yeah.
um there is two rumored flavors of a ghost flavor coming out in September. I don't know if you know this.
I heard that they're coming out with a blue raspberry. I don't know if that's actually out yet. I think they're selling that in like the UK. Last I
Yeah,
checked.
there's a blue raz that is out that they're selling in UK, but in September, no one's confirmed it. Um, well, so there's been a confirmed look on a can, right? So there's a rendering of a raspberries and cream, which that
Mm,
sounds amazing. And then there's been a confirmed like actual picture of a can of a blueberry and cream, which
yeah, that sounds gas.
if either of those two make it to market, all in on that. I got to get my hands on one. Everyone loves an orange and cream because they love the orange creamsicle. A berries and cream, berries and cream, berries and cream.
Yeah, that sounds really good. One that I have heard that I would have been like, I was excited to try and then didn't end up getting it because I heard it wasn't that good is the white gummy bear Gorilla Mind. Because when I think of white gummy bear, I think of the Rain white gummy bear. And I asked Chris, because I'm like, okay, you've tried all these. What is it good? He's like, yeah, I was kind of disappointed. Like I bought a lot and I still have a lot left because it's more of like a pina colada than anything else from what he described it. And like I'm not a
Yes.
huge it's tough to do that well in an energy drink in my opinion.
I don't think pina colada comes through well in an energy drink. I just don't think coconut mixed with like a tartness like works well.
Yeah, it's tough.
Um,
It's so
it's
I was a
much
little disappointed about that.
it's much less like the pineapple-y like flavor and more of like a peanut. That dude, shout out Chris. That's like we got to get him on the show.
I know we do. Like he would be great. Because he's not just like obviously he's been owning the gym for a long time. Dude's got his natural pro card in bodybuilding, so he's like a legit like he's done. I don't know how many shows he's done, but like he knows he's well like vested in that world, which I think would give
Hmm.
us a little bit. Which like to take it back, I feel like that's how I got into like lifting
We
in
don't
general to begin with. That's like
we
our
haven't had
roots.
anybody like that. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So we definitely need to get that guy on.
P.S. I have just the Iowa Strength page scrolling the photos of the gym on my computer on my other screen right now. I'm just looking at it. Number one, I will say this: they have a ton of equipment, but what I like about it is that it's not just crammed.
It's well spaced.
Yes, like the machines are against the wall. There's floor space. Like if you wanted to be athletic in here at some point, like you could. You know, everything is spaced out. The cable crossover machine, big fan. Big fan of their cable crossover and like the two double towers with like the three sides on each. Big fan of that. I mean, old plate loaded, old pin loaded. Is that some of the is that some of like the is that Cybex or like hammer strength that has like the chains on it on like the older like white machines instead of the cables?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean,
They got a hip
let's
thrust machine. I know.
let's
They
go.
got
I see a
hack squat, pendulum
I see a
squat, leg
sick
press.
I see a sick leg press next to what looks to be either a hammer strength or like an older Cybex Smith machine, which I think honestly Smith machines are catching a little bit of a resurgence. I was the biggest Smith machine hater. I am coming around to that on that like it does deserve its place. I don't think it should be if you're going to barbell squat, I don't think the Smith machine should overtake your barbell squat. I think it can be a great change up or like an addition to that. Don't let it be the main character. Let it be the good side character, and I think it's a great thing now.
Yeah, I I'm pretty much the same view as you. I think it can be, and machines in general,
Mm-hmm.
I think are starting to get that little bit of a resurgence too, because people are realizing that like the
They
whole
can be
like
sick.
it's yeah, and like the whole like it's not functional line is kind of just bullshit. Like if it gets we forget that the people are forgetting that they'll say that the weight room is general, but then they say machines aren't
Aren't
functional. It's like
functional.
yeah, it's like it's kind of like you're contradicting yourself.
Hmm.
if it helps you, like it's a good way to like push close to failure in a very safe way. And I think when you're
Exactly.
talking about building capacity and like hypertrophy, I think that's super important. Or just getting a fucking sick pump. Um,
Speaking of like on this note, like I think we got to address this. Like, have you seen on Instagram the dudes that are science based lifters?
yeah, are you? I
They
mean, I've seen like when I think of science based, there's a lot of people that get thrown into that same category. I think there's a
Mhm.
couple people that do it really well. Like I think
Jeff
of like
Nippard,
Renaissance period, yeah, Jeff Nippard and RP Renaissance periodization, like Mike Israetel, those guys that obviously like know what the fuck they're talking about. That's like
it
real science based to me. And then there's a lot of other people that kind of
these dorks.
masquerade. Yeah, like pipe cleater arm. Like
Dude,
I can't even give you a name because I don't even watch that stuff. But I have seen that is getting a lot of flack.
yeah. There's one guy. I don't know his name. If anyone knows his name and you guys follow him, put him in the comments so I can find him and follow him. But what he'll do is he'll watch it. He basically kind of does a floating head thing without doing a floating head thing but he's making fun of the science based lifters who do the floating head. Um, and they'll like watch somebody. They were watching an American like 7 times record holder. It wasn't Maddie Rogers, but it was a 7 times like record holder, American champion in weightlifting for her weight category. And they were like, her back's gonna be fried, her knees and hips are gonna be shot, blah 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 blah. But I guess like, why do you even need to push that much weight? And this guy found the dude's profile that did it, pulled him up, and he's like, maybe you should try training to failure one time. Like your legs are so small, why? Like she's like, and just like ripping on him. But this kind of goes back to like the machines talk where it's like they like a lot of the science based lifters dudes are like, well, you already squatted, you did a leg extension pattern. Why would you do it again? It's like you can and you should at some point. Like if I'm like, there's been times where like I'm gonna front squat as like my main like compound movement for the day, and then I'll finish with some rear foot elevated split squats or just some single leg squats from like a pistol position on a box. They're different movements. They're the same, fundamental movement pattern, but they're different movements because one's unilateral, one's bilateral. I'm holding a front rack versus having to balance whatever it might be, and you're going to work a little bit more of the groin probably on a single leg squat than you will on a front squat. You might work a little bit more of the abductor on a front squat as well as your abdomen muscles bracing. There's all the different little things, and where they overlap, you're going to get to fatigue. And when you train to fatigue, you gain size, right? I'm not a big guy. I'm 172 pounds by any means. I will say there's probably one thing that's decent on me, and it's from the waist down on the leg, on the
uh,
limb, from like my hip to my knee is a
the third
pretty
one.
from the hip to my knee is a pretty built out area. Like I have good quad definition. My hamstrings, I feel like I have great hamstring definition. I have good glute definition. And then like from my calf is a little small, I will be honest, but my Achilles is also this long in comparison to my entire lower limb being this long.
Yeah, if for the people listening, like Brian has the typical like fast guy, like if you see him, you're like, oh yeah, that guy's fast. Guy
Yeah,
runs,
my
guy ran 10-3 because he gets made fun of for calves, but
my
what'd you say when we were at Elon? Like no one cares. Like you get made
oh
fun of
yeah.
for small calves, but like every like good athlete had like small calves. He's like, yeah, I just get fucked now because like I'm not like I'm just coaching now. I'm like comes back to bite me or something.
Yeah, I was like, you do all the cool shit in the gym, right? To be athletic. No one gives a shit about that because you walk in, on the other hand, and your calves are this large,
Yeah,
and they're
like
like,
just
"Wow, that guy's fucking. I want that." I'm like, "No, you actually want this,
yeah.
but no one gives a shit about it."
I'm like yeah. Like this guy right here, pointing to myself. This guy runs like a one. Like this guy can't break below a one fly 10. Brian's like 0.89. So, but yeah, no one gives a shit about that.
No. Uh, but kind of going back to the point of like, you should like, you can stack same movement patterns in order to train to fatigue and train to at least close to failure to build size, right? It's the same reason why a bodybuilder, their day on a typical kind of bodybuilding split might be like back and biceps. They're going to do 4 different variations of curls in order to get the bicep to grow and attack it from every different angle. That's why it works. Obviously, they're loaded with Tren, D-ball, Anavar, and it'd be sick to do that, but I'm not gonna. But but like they train it from yet they do a spider curl, they do a drag curl, they do a traditional bicep curl, they may do a hammer curl, and they're loading up volume on it because it has to get broken down in order to train for size. And in an ideal world, when you're training for sport, you're not doing all of that, because what you're doing is building the capacity to be a better athlete and to go do the skill. Shout out Andrew Benham, the last episode we had, talking about that. But that's because the skill portion is more important. The training, when all you do is train, and it's like, whether it be CrossFit or whether it be just bodybuilding, whether it be just to live a better life, or so-called hybrid training, which I have a piece on that, that stuff, you're training to just to be, more than likely a lot more times, just to be more aesthetically pleasing and a little bit happier with yourself with your shirt off. And that's okay. But then you should train to failure, because you're not getting the extra 7 to 8 hours of skill work.
Yeah, I think it comes down to like stress allotment, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Not that training to failure is bad for athletes, but it just probably doesn't fit into the schedule of like how much training they have throughout a week, especially like during the season. I think maybe
Yeah.
like early off season, if you have a long off season, 100% go for it. I was talking to Gabe the other week. He was telling me some stuff about what he's doing with Shepherd football in their summer training, and he was like, "Yeah, like obviously, like we're kind of all big on like, okay, the field work should take precedence over the weight room work, but like since we don't have as much time in the weight room after the main movement's done, I've just been doing one set to failure on all my accessories." And he said that's been like working pretty well. And I think that's something that I think people like with the science-based stuff. I think
They're so
like
scared they're going to train to mild discomfort.
yes, and I don't think that's what in fact, I know that's not what, like, I think of like Dr. Mike Israetel. That's not what he meant when he said, like, the research is clear, like the one between like 4 and 1 like reps in reserve, like,
Mm-hmm.
is true. But when people say, "Oh, I had 2 reps left," they actually probably had 6 or 8. That's where it gets misconstrued. It's like people are terrible, and like I'm bad at this too. Like people are really bad
Self-regulating.
at yeah, people are bad at like judging like how close they are to failure. And the less often you go to true failure, the less like accurate you're probably going to be. So I think it's good to do kind of like a just like gut check every once in a while, to push yourself. And that's another thing. Like I've talked about this guy a couple different times on the podcast, the Muscle Doc.
Mm-hmm.
His thing is like everything is like RPE 10 or RIR 0, and I just changed the exercise to modulate the intensity, because some exercises, like obviously if I go
A
to
goblet
failure on
squat.
a, yeah, like that's going to be a lower intensity, but the intent is still there, and it takes some of like the mental bandwidth out of it. And like he had a good point too, which I think like will catch some flack, but there might be something to it. It's just a little bit tougher to measure. It's like it's tough to tell, and we see this too, like it's tough to tell athletes to not go 100%,
Yeah.
even when it might be helpful to them. But like, okay, like, is it better to just tell them like, all right, go all out, because that's what they're going to need to do in their sport? And that's I don't know if I have the right answer for that, but it's interesting to think about.
Especially when you have like a high performer. The high performer is not going to want to like tamper down. So that's at that
Exactly.
point, it's like maybe instead of like your deload, you look at your deload instead of, well, I'm going to pull back on intensity and keep the same reps. And maybe you just pull back on the reps, keep the same intensity. But now, instead of being at, say, 8,000 pounds of tonnage, you're at 2,000. Now that they still feel like they went hard, but now it looks more like what people would commonly like refer to as like a primer, where they hit 2 sets of 2 on a trap bar deadlift, super heavy, but it's not truly enough to really fry them, and they can come back, and now the next cycle they can really get into it. But I think that's a good piece.
Yeah, I think that's what it's tough. Like you think about all the different ways to prescribe intensity, and I feel like people have. It used to be like everyone, you do your 1 RM and then you get percentages, and then people have started to kind of get away from that because they don't like max out days as much. But I still think
Hmm.
percentages are like a good. I think even like prescribing a percentage and like a reps in reserve could be helpful because like the
Hmm.
percentages obviously aren't going to be perfect, but they'll get you in the ballpark and they're going to get you a lot closer than telling a guy who hasn't really lifted a whole lot, all right, go until you can do 2 more. How are they going to know that?
Hmm.
It's tough.
I think it's like even when you do like a dynamic effort type of thing too, like hey, like it's really like if you don't constantly update your maxes, and I don't necessarily mean that on like you need to have a max out day every 6 weeks. I don't think you need to, especially within an athlete. I think it can be helpful for like the common person who just goes to the gym. It's like see where you're at. Um, but like if you have hard triples or hard doubles, like to like 1 to 2 reps in reserve, like commonly programmed, like even if it is just a small piece of it, the athlete knows a little bit more like their limitations, like you had said. But that way you can also be like, hey, you're supposed to be at 55%. Well, my 55% today might be different than what it was 6 weeks ago. Um, but I know that like, hey, this ain't. We've seen it all the time. Like even when you were at Elon with the football guys, where it's like we program 55%, and they're like, hey man, like this just feels really, really light. And I'm like, oh, it should. But then you see it and it moves at 1.2 meters per second. You're like, all right, we kind of need more of like a point 0.8. Like
Yeah,
let's
bump
throw
it
it.
up.
Let's throw a 10 on each side, and then sooner or later, you have a freshman who's, he's like, this is like I'm not feeling anything, and that's when he's like, all right, throw some 25s on, maybe throw another 45 on if it's a squat day or whatever it is. But now it's like you're kind of moving in the right range. It passes the eye test of like it's moving at the same speed of what we're looking for, that kind of stuff. So like athletes who can know what that failure is, can know what the like desired effect is much more important, and they're allowed to kind of like regulate off of that, like that bandwidth, right? When you program a percentage, right? A percent range is great. I love a percent range because it's like you, based on your sleep, you might even just your sleep or your hydration level that day, you might be at the bottom of the range or you might be at the top of the range, but like the middle is like essentially like my anchor to kind of flow off of. Or if you just say like, vice versa, I'm going to program this anchor and say it's, 74% or whatever arbitrary number. And you're like, you got about 10 to 15 pounds each way that you can kind of flow. Super simple, great way to program. Um, but I want to talk about hybrid athletes. This one's been on my mind here. And the
Here we
coach,
go.
the Coach 'em Up podcast had a really, I don't know his name. I only saw the clip. I didn't watch the whole thing, so don't hate me. But they had it on there of like, he was like, everyone loves a hybrid athlete kind of name, but all you're doing is training. You're not hybrid in anything. There's no skill work to it, right? He's like, it's lifting and running. They're not even sprinting. It's just lifting and long distance running. They're just
Yeah,
building.
why is that the default of a hybrid athlete? Why
I
is that the
don't know.
default?
It frustrates me as someone who I'll train a little bit of, aerobic activity, not much. I posted on my story. I don't know if you saw it. DeMarco bodied me with like some like just aerobic stuff, and it was pure hell. But I'll step into that. I sprint regularly, jump, do all like the 3 dimensional stuff like on the field just to get better and more athletic. Obviously, lift heavy, lift fast, and then find a skill, right? Right now, like the skill I've been like starting to pick up, if you see it behind me, is my golf bag. I've been golfing a little bit more. Um, my buddy, shout out Kyle. He's a great golfer. I mean, incredible. I think his average score right now, getting back into the summer for him, he's in the north, so 74 to 76 is kind of where he's like hanging at. That's where he's calling me. Tell you what, this is a sidebar. This is the funniest thing ever, but he literally he fixed my timing with the simplest cue. He's like, I know it's going to sound dumb, but I want you to say Hawk Tua when you're in your backswing. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, Hawk on the backswing, on the downswing, Tua. And by the time you hit that's when you're going to contact the ball. I was on the course yesterday. I had some like 18-year-olds, so my stadium pulse was on 40, just like standing behind me. Just absolutely shit the bed the first 3 holes. Caught some space up so that way I could get my pace of play right. And I was just like, just go back to that, just Hawk Tua. And then I started just piping like perfect shots, just focusing on that. I called them up like on like hole 8. I'm like, dude, it's working right now. Yeah. But all that to say, like, these hybrid athletes don't have skill. There's no skill to it. And like the example that he gave was like, they can't Smith grind an age stair, which that's a very extreme thing. Like that's a top level skateboarder type of action, like to be able to hop on a rail like that and be able to just go for it. But, they're not even playing like pickleball, man. They're not going to play pickup at the YMCA or at their local court. They're not even playing dodgeball or, playing pickup softball at a bar league or volleyball, whatever it is. There's no skill development to make them an athlete. And that's not to say that like a distance runner isn't an athlete. But like, they're also not fast enough to where if they were to walk into a track meet, they could hop into a 1500 or a 3K and fare well. They're just doing 2 things mediocrely bad. And we've talked about it before on like, they're 2 conflicting things of like lifting strong and lifting heavy and long distance running. It's so far on the spectrum, right? One of them has to take precedence. And it's basically just, well, I want to be at least a kind of jacked distance runner. Then just say that I want to be a kind of jacked distance runner, but it's not as cool as a little name.
Yeah. It's so interesting that that's like the default of like a hybrid athlete. I'm sure someone started that, like, I don't know who, but yeah, it's like 2 very like low to no skill type of deals. Like to be good at distance running is more of just like how much volume can your body like tolerate over time versus like, oh, I need to like hone my, obviously like your form can't be atrocious, but
you can get away with a lot. You have a lot of wiggle room for error.
Yeah, the longer the event, I feel like this is like a pretty good heuristic. The longer like the time horizon of the event, like the less constraints you have probably for that skill. Like when you think about a marathon, like your form, it matters, and that probably adds up over time, but it's not the same as like if you mess up in like 100-meter or
a 60.
Like a baseball swing where you have like that's like
a millisecond.
Exactly, like such a short amount of time. There's less room for error.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I 100% agree. Like the longer the event, I think this is a great way to put it. Like the longer the event, the more the tactical outweighs the technical. You can get away with some okay technical components, and obviously like the gait is very important and the stride efficiency is really important. No one's saying it's not, but
the strategy comes into play a lot more.
Your race strategy is far more important. You're less worried about, am I having the proper arm swing in a 10K than you are of after 5, I'm going to hammer down for a K and I'm going to make everybody else hurt. So that way I can peel away from them and then I can kind of pull back a little bit. Yeah. Those are, I mean, if you're a good 10K runner, you're probably choosing the second strategy or the second like thought process to be successful instead of, am I making sure I'm stepping in the right way? Or does this have to be perfect or there's no room for error? It's that kind of thing versus, like you said, like a baseball swing or like even in the game of basketball where it's like, hey, if I go for a fast break, I have to make sure that, my concentration is on the rim as well as the ball because God forbid, in the 4 seconds I get down there, I go to and I miss dribble, and now the ball's off the court.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, obviously, there's like race strategy to an extent in like the shorter sprints,
Mm-hmm.
but it's nothing like that's why you can see obviously you can see upsets in the sprints, but like that's why you can see guys with like good times in like distance events, but they'll falter under certain like types of races.
Yeah.
Like if
Like if
they don't
someone's
have a kick or if they, the type of race kind of matters.
Yeah, if someone's going out really slow, but you're more prone to like gunning and just riding like redlining the entire race, you're not set up for a race that's probably playing to your strengths or at least your common strategy. So if everyone's trying to be really tactical and just really come out slow and then just kick the final two, a lot different of a race.
Yeah, and that's why like some guys like I think of like I haven't kept up with track a whole lot this year, but like Jakob Ingebrigtsen, obviously like he was on that hot streak, especially after he won in Tokyo. He won
Mm-hmm.
the gold in Tokyo. Um, but he had like a very like clear strategy. He had a kick, but he didn't have the best kick. So he was more of like a okay, I'm going to lead from the front and then try to squeeze after the second lap and just try to get as much distance as possible. And that's kind of how he started getting like upset by like Josh Kerr and those guys is like they kept close enough and they had a good kick that they were just able to blast him at the end.
Mm-hmm. Which is cool to see because it's not like you want to see the leader fall. I think everybody has that a little bit in them, but it becomes more about, you know, how do I attack every race differently and become better all around to where that's not going to throw me off and lead to my failure, but I can also play to this other people's strengths and I'm good enough that like I can be successful in those situations.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that and you reminded me of it when you talked about your golf cue there. We talked about it a little bit with like Andrew,
Mm-hmm.
but I've been thinking about like queuing lately, like in general, and how
Mm-hmm.
that's like he said it's changed for him, and I feel like it's changed for me too. And I've like been thinking about it a lot, and I haven't really come up with a solid answer. But like, what is good queuing, and like, how do you teach or learn queuing? Because I feel like for the longest time, I think this is kind of a lot of people when they get into the field, you're going to listen to the people that you're interning for or working for because hopefully they have your best interest and like they have more experience than you. And you don't really think as much about like, okay, how could a different cue affect how this is performed? And maybe different people benefit from different cues, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe better cueing is not cueing at all to an extent. And I think it probably makes a bigger impact on skill stuff, like the weight room. I think the same like general cues work for like a majority of people. Obviously, you're going to have some wiggle room there. It's going to be probably a little bit different when you're talking about sprints, like start out of the blocks, a baseball pitch, a baseball swing, something like that. What are what are your thoughts on how cueing? Because obviously, like I think of like the counter movement jump on a force plate. The cues
Mm-hmm.
that you use on that will like can determine how that jump is performed and skew the results by quite a bit. And I think that's a
Mm-hmm.
good like example of like how that can change what you're doing in like weight room patterns too, except for we just don't have a force plate there. So we probably don't notice it as much. Like
Mm-hmm.
obviously you can use your coach's eye, but how and you have a good perspective on this because you're the skill and the strength. So what are your thoughts on that?
I cue differently with different teams in the weight room. For number one, like with football, especially like during the summer, like at least like the first 2 weeks, we almost kind of like over cue and over coach just to like get obviously to get interns like the reps. Um, Whereas like my team, a lot of the times, like I just run it differently. And like the first thing is like I'm just gonna watch them move. If there's no like extremely apparent error, I'm gonna let them like self organize and kind of figure it out. and then I'll like intervene if I start to see something that like goes wrong, like on a front squat, like if I see like them trying to like hold the bar versus like just letting it sit there, like those kind of things. But for a lot of the time, I'm just gonna let the athlete kind of figure it out. I think that's more beneficial. Um, when it comes to like skill work, especially like in practice for us, I'm not gonna cue really during anything under 100 meters. I'm not cueing them. I'm going to talk about what I'm looking to see, and then I want them to kind of figure it out too. Because again, it's going to make them a little bit better of an athlete and they'll understand. The other aspect is like, I don't necessarily want them to be thinking, if that makes sense, during that event. I want to just get, I want to talk to them about what I want to see, let them hit the rep, and then we'll discuss how the rep felt. And then we're going to do that enough times to where now I have subconscious behaviors that they're not constantly thinking about. Because in track and field, your game speed is like, how can you just not think? And how can stuff just be instantaneous? So like I'll look at like a block start, for example. Like I'm going to tell them, how I want your shoulders. And then maybe like a good thing would be like with their hands. Are people like pushing and then their hands like just go to their hip pockets? Like they're got little double guns. Well, I want you to think about like lighting a match with your fingertips. I stole this one from somebody else, you know, like actually like ripping away at the track. I thought that was a really good cue. And it's worked very well, but like that's a good thing on cueing is like ask questions to other coaches. How are you cueing something, or listen when they talk about their program. Everyone's going to want to talk about their program and tell you how smart they are. The best coach is going to watch somebody else, is going to look for good information, not to copy the whole program, but like that's a really good piece. I think there's a way I can work that in somewhere. And I think more so it's how they coach it versus what the program is themselves. Another good one too is like when I teach like a block start, I don't want them to think about stepping out of the block. I want them to push and have like a split stance broad jump, for lack of a better term. So what I'm telling them is, hey, when you're in there, like, did you ever go like swimming when you were a kid? Right? I'm going to ask them that question. Most kids have gone swimming at some point or another. All right, when you're in the pool and you're like messing around with your friends, did you guys ever try to just take off on a race? All right, I want you to think about how hard you pushed away from the wall of the pool, that side. That's what your block start is you're pushing away from the side of that wall. Now I'm going to put you in the blocks after you've thought about it for a second, and I'm going to see if you start to see that translation. Boom. Right? I think like it's really beneficial when you can relate it to something. And any of the girls that I coach, they're going to tell you like I'm the king of like analogies, and I'm just going to pull one random one out of the hat to try and get it. But I'm going to find one that's going to connect. And sometimes it's going to miss. Sometimes it'll go right over your head. But I'm going to do that because when you can fully understand what I'm trying to relate to, now you can start to think about and visualize like what that feels like, what that should go like, and you're going to go for it. So like that's a good one. The other one might be like when we're like doing like some dribbles or something. You've heard me say this one 1,000 times probably. When we start teaching the dribbles, did you ever go to a Chinese restaurant, right? And they have the cat that you put the coin on, and the cat kind of paws and grabs that coin and puts it in the little bank. I want you to be that cat machine. Or if you have like a cat who has a toy, right, and they always grab at it. That's what a dribble is. You're grabbing and pulling to contact underneath you. That kind of stuff. Car engine with a piston when it comes to accel. I need you to drive down. It's not about, pulling back up, right? When you see a piston fire in a car engine, it's hammer down and then it slowly relaxes back up, hammer down, hammer down. That's what it is. On bounds, shout out Michael Gregg, Harding. I stole this one from him. When I teach a bound, it's break the ice underneath you. I want you to try and punch that ground so hard that you break the ice underneath you. But like, I think relating it to something that they know, and then when a cue doesn't work for you, it doesn't mean it's not a good cue. It just might not work for that population. So becoming a more well-rounded individual, or like understanding other coaches, and then you can apply it, better to your situation.
Yeah, I think the more ways you can explain the same thing, like in a different way, probably the better. Probably
Mm-hmm.
means you just understand it more thoroughly, especially with like the analogies is a good point.
I guess for you in that aspect, especially where you're at now, where to some point there's probably a little bit of a language barrier. You know, how do you get that?
You know, I feel like the first year not that I wouldn't have had an answer. It's difficult for sure. Obviously, like the language barrier is there. The more I've learned, the easier it's gotten. For me, it's a lot of like visual and then keeping it really simple, like knowing the body parts and like it'll sound a little bit different, like with like the translation, but like keeping it simple. And then I think at first I was like super like eager to like correct people right away versus like you said, like letting them figure it out. And a lot of times, like on certain movements, you'll find out that they usually like perfect example, like on a rear foot elevated split squat. If the foot's like super close to the like it's too close, they're gonna like do it one or two times and be like, oh, that's really uncomfortable, and move the foot forward. That usually takes care of itself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but honestly, it's like very simple, just like and you know, for what it's worth, I know like when we were at Elon, we were like, okay, core tight is like a shitty cue, and like I guess I haven't really like used that one, but like some cues that seem like more just like empty, like chest up's always one. It's
Mm-hmm.
okay. You don't necessarily like if you're doing a squat, you don't necessarily want your chest up, but the intention of driving the chest up will probably get you to like upright at least, which
Yeah.
is if you arrive at the goal, that's what matters.
Yeah.
I think with that also too, it's like it's a little bit different. I don't know if it's probably partly me, but like sometimes you get athletes that like you cue them once and then you never have to tell them again. Versus others, like you have to like keep hounding that, and I feel like I get more of that down there. Maybe it's just because these guys are really like raw. Um, pause, but like having to like do that every single week and like knowing and just like being persistent with that, and it's a really slow process sometimes, but not getting like discouraged, and then
Mm-hmm.
obviously like making modifications if needed. Um, Changing like the constraints has been another big one. A lot of times, like what this is just what I've like noticed. A lot of our guys super wide squat stance, like they naturally want to have like a super wide stance,
Mm-hmm.
and like obviously like you're already in like a crazy amount of like ER, so it's tough to squat. Just try to put your legs like way outside your hips and then try to squat as deep as you can. It's tough because you just run out of space in your hip joint. So just tell them to bring the hips in a little bit, or like a heel lift has been like a big one. Like a lot of them will come up off their heels. They just don't have a lot of like ankle range of motion. So I know like some people, I feel like I used to be this like, oh, like you should like just try to do it without a heel lift. And sometimes that's just wasting your time because some people are like, no matter how much like mobility work they do, are never going to get that knee
That
over toe action.
that
Yeah,
flexion is just not going to happen.
exactly. And you put like a 10-degree like heel lift upon them, and bam, all of a sudden they can get below parallel like no problem. Bring their feet in a little bit, huge difference. And like you
Mm-hmm.
ask them like, does that like feel different? Like, oh yeah, stuff like that. Um,
You kind of like bring me to this point, and I think it was really crucial for my development. I think as a coach is that everyone needs to coach a really raw athlete to learn how to simplify all their cues, their coaching points, and stuff like that, and even their programming. Everyone wants to come out and have this like extremely intricate program with these and show you how smart they are, right? We've all done it. We've all been there. For you, it's, you're finally in the DR where these guys haven't seen a weight room before. And, for me in my development, like, it's probably a more common one, especially nowadays, is I think most people should at least once or twice, like, in their career. And I don't mean like one day and call it good. I mean, like, you should work a couple months to, win an internship, a part-time job, whatever it is, with a youth athlete early in your development. Like when I started and I was a director at Northern Lights, we had 18s who basically were, our 18s teams were all going to play as freshmen at, P4 volleyball schools. They were killer athletes, and they, that was where you got to coach like your elites. And then as you kind of went down, you started to get towards like 13s. 13-year-olds don't really know how to squat. We had obviously like our 11s and they're goblet squatting 5 pounds, but learning how to do it. But like, then you start to think like, I can't say chest up. I can't say, pinch your shoulder blades together. You kind of have to like rework that to be a very, very simple cue where it was like, I learned like, instead of saying like chest up, like for me, what really worked with like a young athlete was like, oh, like, let me see the logo on your shirt. I need to see the logo on your shirt. If you're too far down, I can't see it. I got to see it. And then they go, and then all of a sudden their chest comes up and they have that intention while they squat, in this case, a goblet squat, of like the vertical torso. Well, now that that's cleaned up, and now I come back, we're coaching 18 to 23-year-olds. And if they forget, I'm like, show me the logo on your chest. Boom. Now it cleans way up, and they understand that a little bit better than like chest up. So like, I think something like that is really, we always worry about developing an athlete. We never worry about really developing ourselves and where something is missed. And I think most people would really benefit, as no matter what level of coaching you're at, would benefit from that.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And sometimes I'll just go like, obviously, like my first year, like the visual cues were like what saved me. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, if I need someone to like, if they're like this, I'll just go like that. And then if they do it right, make sure to give that reinforcing, like positive feedback, like good, just like that every single rep. And that helps. But I definitely agree with you. And I think that's something that I like, when a lot of people get into the field, they don't think like, oh, I really want to coach high school or like youth athletes. Usually it goes to like, I want to coach pros or like P4, this and that. And I was the same way. I kind of still am. Like, I want to like work with like, you want to work with high level athletes, so to say. But I think sometimes the best growth opportunities are with people that like, you've said this all the time, like, okay, can you take someone that's garbage and make them serviceable, or are you just taking guys that are already good and like not, maintaining or like maybe improving a little bit? There's a big difference between that. Um, so I think because it's a different, it tests like your patience, I think is the biggest thing too, at least for me. Like, you're used to people just picking up stuff like pretty quickly versus like, okay, I'm gonna have to attack this from a little bit different angle. And I think that is what, once, if you go away from that population after that, it makes everything else seem so much easier, I think.
I think so too. And like I said, like having been in the system, and I was an assistant before I was a director there, and having seen like some of these kids that you're teaching how to squat, and after 2-3 years, maybe they go from 15s to 17s, and all of a sudden the same kid that you were, again, having to be very patient with because they've just never seen it, and all of a sudden now that's like they're hitting front squats at 100 and 125 135 pounds for 14 to 20 reps in one set, and it's really clean, and you're like, that's the delayed gratification. And anyone who ever met me can tell you that I am an impatient bastard. But like, that would have carried over into my career, and I would have been very frustrated and not as successful if I didn't have to, like, if I wasn't forced to, in a situation, sit there and be patient, be like, we're learning. We're in the learn to train piece of the program. That's more important than training to perform or training to compete. So let's learn to train.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think, yeah, like I said, I think people jump to like, okay, I want to work with just super high level people, and then maybe they go from that to like working with a younger population, and they might get a little bit stuck because
Hmm.
they're not you're used to like them just like getting it right away, and not everyone gets it right away.
And I think that's like it's really hard too. And this is one reason why I'm not a big fan of the private sector. I understand it does, like for the coach, it can provide a lot more, I guess, like freedom of life. Obviously, there's like the money opportunity where it can be technically limitless, however you want to scale it, and all these other things. But like, if you don't show results right away, you're gonna lose clientele, and that's my kind of problem with it. Or if you're not doing this like cool, like if you're gonna do the basic stuff, it's kind of boring, and you either won't get someone to come in and do it, or you're going to lose somebody because in this case for like a youth athlete, like a parent's like, well, they're just like they're just doing like really simple, like we could just do that at home or whatever it is, versus like throwing 18 bands and a chain around them and all this other stuff. It forces the coach to not do right for the sake of their bottom line, which is unfortunate. And I don't know if there is a solution right now until there's a bigger understanding of like, hey, my kid is a kid and they just need to learn to get a little bit stronger and move a little bit better, but they need to do that basic stuff, right? And when you have a parent, like we had a couple parents that, I mean, we had daughters of, Vikings players in Minnesota when we were at Northern Lights. The dad would kind of stop by. It's obviously super cool to shake his hand, and his hand's the size of my head. He could pick me up like a football. But he's peeking in here and he's seeing, 12-year-olds, and they're just working through like a squat progression. There's nothing better than when you have a parent who's like, I like this. It's just simple and it's doing its job, right? But not every parent's going to be like that. They're going to want the parent who wants you to pull out every ladder and this and that. And it's like, this isn't like, they're not training like a 22-year-old. Well, they don't need that. So it makes it really difficult for like private sector. And I think I don't want to say it's like a deter, it's definitely a deterrent for me to ever go private sector. Um, but like, I think it's an obstacle that a lot of coaches need to consider before they go, well, I just want to own my own gym.
Yeah, that's a really good point, especially as someone who like wants to own their own gym someday, myself personally. And like I've thought about that because it's so like does that come from just educating people better, but they have to be open minded enough to want to hear you in the first place?
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's kind of like because then there's also people that have done that really well. Like I'm thinking like Cressy, Driveline. Those are two really big people in the baseball space. Obviously, but they're usually training higher level guys. I mean, I'm sure
Hmm.
they have some guys that come in there that are like high school age, but I don't know if that just comes from like track record of okay, I've worked with these people, this caliber of athlete, and this is what I did, so it'll work for your kid, and that's kind of just like a trump card to that. But is that also like a cop out? Like it's
I think it's a bit of a cop out, but it's a necessary cop out of,
yeah,
hey, I've been very successful with high level individuals. I know what it takes to get there. And I think that's where your like communication and education piece comes into play of like not just working with the high level guys, but being successful with the high level guys or high level girls. Like when you do that and you're like, I know what I need in order for that to work, this is the precursor of that. They need to go through this because we'll never be able to get to that point and make use of it if we don't do this. But hopefully that question never comes. Hopefully you have a clientele who's like, I trust you. You're going to do what's right. Here's the money. Go train. Go train the kid. That kind of thing, or go train my 16-year-old. Um, Odds are you're not going to have that. You're going to have the hover parent who's in the session who is probably going to stand there on the side of the weight room at the side of the turf with their arms crossed. And every time you turn your back, they're trying to coach their kid while you do that. And then now you have the question of how do I remove you from the session? And I'm going to give you a little hint, right? For anyone who's doing private sector, you blame it on the big bad person that everybody hates. You blame it on insurance. That's what you do. You blame it on insurance. Hey, you're not insured to be out here right now. I appreciate your mom and dad. Like, if you want, like, we have a waiting room. Like, if you want to just hang out, you can hang out in there, but we can't have you out here because of insurance purposes. I got to take it from here. Boom.
That's a cheat code. I'm going to need to remember that one. It's
Yeah,
a quick, nice way to tell you to get the fuck off the floor.
pretty much. It's implying get the fuck out of here without saying that and pissing somebody off.
Yes, that's a good point.
And everybody hates insurance, so they're going to be like, number one, I'm not going through to read all that. No one's going to do that. And if they are, they're probably not a client that you want because they're probably going to make more problems. And two, they're going to be like, it's not him. He's not, he doesn't mind, but it's the insurance company. Like, if something goes wrong, he doesn't want to lose his business. Everybody understands that one. You point the finger.
Exactly. Shit. You want to talk about anything else, or should we wrap this bad boy up for this week?
We've done a couple really long ones, so should we leave the people wanting more on this one?
Yeah, I want to come back to that a certain individual we were going to talk about. We're going to, obviously we talk about stuff that's sort of educational, but to get views, we have to throw some shade at some people. So, but I think we leave that to next week. Let's have this one be a clean. Well, we already talked shit on hybrid athletes, so maybe we can spread out the hate over a couple weeks here before we go at a popular influencer that we were talking about before the show. But yeah, stay tuned for next week for that one.
Don't worry, man. Your day is coming.
I was gonna say, yeah. And Brian doesn't forget. Brian never forgets.
People don't forget.
Exactly. Should we review these bad boys?
Yeah. Do we want to start with a little lighter review, or do we want to go right into the deep end with some hatred?
How about you go first?
Okay, because I feel like yours is going to be some hatred.
Yeah.
Shit. Watermelon grape 3D. Again, unbeatable price. $1.99 a can or $20 for a 12-pack. I would say this is out of the flavors I've tried, I think there's 6 total flavors. I've tried 4. I would probably put this at a 3 to 4. I think the blueberry mist is my top flavor. Strawberry lemonade is my number 2. And then I think it's more dependent on the mood for cucumber melon or watermelon grape. It's pretty sweet. If you like sweet, you're going to love this. The Nerd's little kind of finish at the end is pretty good. I'm a big fan. I'm going to go 7.3.
Okay, that's solid.
Very solid. It could be a daily driver. For me, it's more of like a one-off than it is the daily driver because of the sweetness. But I could see like anyone else in the entire world would be like, that's a sick ass flavor.
Yeah. All right. Well, for this guy here, Accelerator Cherry Ice Pop. The price, very good. Like $1.65 for 200 migs. That's a pretty good price. The look of the can is decent. I would say it's like slightly below average. I'm not a huge fan, but it could be worse. The ingredients are, I feel like pretty average. 200 milligrams of caffeine, not a whole lot else in there. But the thing that's going to tank this bad boy is the taste. The taste is terrible. It's like a cherry cough medicine with like a metallic aftertaste. I think I got about a third to a half of the can left. I'm probably just going to dump this thing after. So that's when you know it's bad. God, the taste is it was just disappointing, to be honest with you. I think overall I'm going to have to go like a 3.9.
Ooh.
It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. Yeah, I don't have anything else to say. Would not recommend, would not pick it up again. Unless it was like life or death. So yeah, do not recommend Accelerator Cherry Ice Pop.
Sorry, Travis Kelce and Lindsey Horan and Olivia Dunn. You guys sold out for a can.
Yeah, fix your shit.
Now, this being said, if they want to sponsor us, we will sell out and we'll redo that.
Yeah, I'll give you a perfect 10.
Yeah. Like we had mentioned, you guys definitely follow us on Instagram at bevboys.tv. You can find myself posting a lot of training content lately, as well as Bev Boys clips at BSZUTKOWSKI. Old friendship boy here can be found at
French_fit40. I've taken like a semi hiatus from Instagram, but I'm trying to get back on the horse in this next week or so. Just feel like I kind of needed a break. Was going home for a little bit, but I'm gonna get back on the horse. Bed Boys content, obviously. Gonna be posting a few clips from there, past episodes that I think you guys would really enjoy, as well as getting back on with some training, training content, nutrition, all that good stuff. And then make sure to go to the website bevboys.com. T-shirts, hats, as we said, are in stock. Go grab you one, khaki or white. We'll see how this first batch goes, and then we'll probably kind of reiterate from there if we need to. But super excited for that. YouTube, Bev Boys, and then find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Make sure to subscribe, like, recommend it to a friend if you did enjoy it. Yeah, we got some good ideas coming up for guests in the future, as well as some topics. So excited. Appreciate you guys for watching as always, and we will catch you next time.
Peace.